Feed the Monster by Ron Ward, Jr. Narrated by Edison McDaniels. Prologue. That little old lady was the devil incarnate. Dean Brandon sat behind the table in a packed store for his book signing session, his dark hair parted to the left, AC/DC shirt, blue jeans, and worn white sneakers. The original table wasn't tall enough for his 5'10", 190-pound frame, so the bookstore owners placed thick encyclopedias underneath each leg, raising it to the best-selling author's comfort zone. A pile of books sat on one side of the rectangular table, and a line of people had steadily flowed through. He was pleased to see a range in age, from teenagers to older folks. A few even appeared the age of or beyond retirement. All smiling faces, excited to pay for a signature from the one many proclaimed as their new favorite writer. Next in line, a grinning middle-aged woman with long red hair and glasses leaned forward with her copy of his second of two bestsellers, opened it to the title page, pointed, and said, "Right here. To Ella with much love, please." It was after he followed her wishes, thanked her, and waited for the middle-aged man behind her to approach the table when Dean noticed the old woman 3 line positions back. Not that he just saw her, but he felt her, too. She was about 5 feet tall, with thin gray hair that seemed made of straw. In appearance, she was just a little old grandma, wearing a summer dress from the 80s with orange flowers on it, standing there in brown, worn-out sandals. A sweet old woman who had come to show Dean some support and make off with his signature. It was possible she wasn't even here for herself, but maybe for a grandchild who she thought might get a thrill from having Dean's signature in his or her possession. She was looking hard at him. Her face was one of focus and anger. She stared at him like he'd done something awful to either her or someone she loved. It wasn't just her steady glare of hatred that caught his attention. There was a feeling, a sense of something sinister emitting from her, like a hum from a personal desk fan. For a few moments, Dean couldn't look away. It was like being spooked by a ghost passing through a wall into an adjacent room. He trembled, and his palms felt sticky with sweat. This wasn't a sweet old grandmother waiting in line to see him. She was someone or something else, something bad incarnate from a forgotten nightmare. He wanted to look away, but couldn't, and for several long moments, the rest of the store seemed to disappear. All its fans were gone. The books and the shelves behind him vanished. The windows that covered the front of the store, which had welcomed in sunlight from a perfect summer day outside, suddenly went dark as if storm clouds moved in above Louisville, Kentucky. It was just Dean and the old lady, whose glare wasn't just one of hatred, but of deep evil. "Mr. Brandon?" The man's voice brought Dean back. Everything reappeared as it was before. The lady still stood in her spot, watching him, but he could finally pull his eyes away from her. As if snapped out of a trance, Dean looked up at the would-be fan and smiled. "Sorry, went off into a daydream." The man handed an open paperback to him and said, "I know the feeling, man. Happens to us writers all the time." Dean took the book and scribbled his name in it while asking with fake interest, "Oh, you write too?" "Yes, but not published just yet. Maybe your signature will bring me a little luck." After signing his name, Dean continued to write while saying, "Good luck on your creative adventure," and wrote the same words under his signature. He then handed the book back to the man and said, "Good luck, man. I look forward to seeing you again with some good news." "Thank you," Will said as he smiled at Dean's handwriting, closed the book, and hurried away. She was 2 people back now, and staring at Dean as if she hoped to look deep enough to see his soul. He avoided eye contact, and with effort, focused on the next signing. A teenage girl, no older than 17, handed him a paperback book and said, "To Layla with love, please." He took the book, fulfilled her request, and added his John Hancock. He smiled and said, "Thank you, Layla," as he handed the book back to her. She giggled and walked away. The old lady was 1 person back. Now Dean could see she was holding a hardback book in her hands, but it didn't look like his book. By the dark cover, it wasn't either novel he'd published. The hairs on the back of his neck felt as if they were standing up, warning him of danger nearby. Not just the danger of something bad, but of something unworldly and awful. Something beyond wicked and even purely evil. He scanned the line of fans in search of signs that any of them also noticed the sinister-appearing senior citizen. None of their demeanors or countenances showed any indication they noticed her, or the hatred she emitted like an oscillating fan pushing air through its high-speed blades. He was tired. The promotional part of selling his book had been exhausting for the past few weeks. The traveling had worn him down, and he was glad to be just one county over from his home for this final signing session. Once this ended 2 hours from now, he was only a half-hour drive from his new house in Shelbyville, Kentucky. His hideaway of solitude on 10 acres and surrounded by woods was not only the perfect place to start his next book, which he already had outlined and was excited to get to, but it was away from people. He wasn't a people hater, but too much of anything or anyone caused him minor anxiety. He was also excited about finally kicking back in his new home. Construction had just finished, and he'd barely had time to move in before his current book tour began. He wanted to kick back, relax, and write. But he wasn't tired enough to hallucinate, was he? He blinked his eyes several times, hoping the woman's foul presence would transform back to the precious elderly lady she seemed in appearance. It didn't work, and she continued to stare him down. Even though he returned her glare, although his was of curiosity and even slight fear, she didn't look away even for a moment. She was fixated. She was angry. She was filled with hatred, evil. Next was a woman in her 20s, a brunette with her huge breasts almost falling out of her red tank top as she leaned forward with an open paperback extended to Dean. He focused on her attractive smiling face and asked, "Anything special or just a signature?" "Just signature." She talked fast, like a hipster from the late 80s. Although standing right before him, her voice was muffled, as if she was speaking from inside a glass bubble. Any other time, Dean would have struggled to keep his focus on this woman's eyes rather than her breasts. But he was distracted by something bad that seemed to fill the entire bookstore like a frigid chill moving through the region in early November. He scribbled his name and handed her the book with a thanks and a smile. He realized he didn't want her to walk away, not because she was gorgeous and had huge breasts, but because the scrutinizing evil old lady was next. Dean felt his heart racing as if it were trying to escape from his chest. His hand shook. He felt his smooth-shaven face glisten with sweat. The old lady moved forward quickly and slammed the hardback down face up on the table. The book's cover was plain black. There was no cover art or even a title, just a thick black book. The table rocked as if she'd brought the book down on it with the strength of a bodybuilder instead of the softness of a sweet and fragile old lady. Dean held his breath, and it felt like his heart stopped as she leaned in only a few inches from his face. Her eyes were black, not dilated, but actually colored black. The aura that she gave off, the evil, seemed to swallow the air between them, enveloping Dean into some kind of invisible vice-like grip. His body went numb. He wanted to back up. He wanted to get out of the chair and retreat, but he couldn't. Frozen with fear and awe, he could only stare back at her. When she spoke, she whispered with restrained hatred, and her breath had an odor that he recognized from when he'd found a dead raccoon in his garbage can years ago. The aroma of death. She said, "You think you can escape what you are by writing a book?" Confusion and fear held Dean in silence. Again, he wanted to flee, but something held him in place. Something that she controlled like she had two other arms, invisible, reaching out and holding him in place like a mother does a tantrum-throwing child. The evil old bitch waited a moment, tilting her head from one side to the other as she seemed to peek into his mind. She said, "You'll not deny me what's mine. Satiate that need. You can't erase what you are." "Who are you?" Dean finally asked in a whisper. "I am the one who waits for your soul. You can't change what's already in motion, Dean. You can't replace the blood that flows through your veins." She leaned in even closer, almost as if to kiss him. He wanted to pull back. He wanted to jump up out of the chair and back away from her, but invisible ropes overpowered his will. "Do you really want to play games with the devil? You write that book, and I'll make you beg for death." Dean trembled uncontrollably. He couldn't reply. He couldn't even think. Fear froze him like winter cold does the ground, making it solid as concrete. "You can't stop it," she whispered even softer. Then she grinned, rotting teeth, her face wrinkling not with time, but with evil. "The book won't help. Writing it won't change what you really are." Still in his face, she slowly lifted her hardback book. Then she cocked her head one more time and said, "You're mine," and slammed the book on the table again. Dean fell backward in his chair and toppled to the floor. A sudden murmur from the crowd lined up before him. Lying on his side on the floor, he looked up toward the old lady, who had suddenly changed. The evil had gone. Her countenance had changed from sinister to confused. She was holding a paperback out and frozen in her stance, as if worried she'd caused him to fall. The book in her hands was his most recent. "Are you okay, young man?" she asked, her voice as sweet, old, and innocent as the purest grandmother on the planet. Sunlight poured in from the summer day outside, the entire store illuminated by it. The line of fans and patrons, everyone staring at him in confusion. Some whispering, some staring silently. The old lady sat her book down on the table and came around to him. She kneeled down beside Dean and said, "Young man, are you hurt?" She reached out to touch his shoulder, and he yelped and squirmed a few feet away from her. The crowd's chatter grew. Dean looked up at them, confusion and awe on his face. They were reacting to his falling incident and not to the woman. They still hadn't seen what she was only moments ago. Only he had seen it. "Young man?" the old lady asked again as she scrutinized Dean. He couldn't talk. He lay there on the floor, on his right side, looking from her to the line of fans, looking around the bookstore as if in search of some hidden clue to what just happened. His hands so drenched with sweat that they slowly slid on the hardwood floor while he held his position. "Young man?" the old lady repeated. He glanced at her. There was no evidence in her face, in her existence, of what she'd been and said only moments ago. She was just a concerned, sweet old lady now, the devil that she had been long gone. Even she herself didn't seem to know what had just happened. The book he was planning to write, the wicked old woman with the rotting teeth and the aura of evil had referred to it, and it seemed she had known what nobody else but him could know, why he was writing it. "Satiate that need. You can't possibly erase what you are." "No," he whispered. "I'm writing it." Grandma cocked her head in confusion and said, "I'm sorry, young man. What?" He looked at her, stared into her eyes. They were black again. She grinned at him, the rotting teeth. Death's aroma was once again present and strong. A chill, as if a freezing winter breeze had made its way through the store. Evil,